I'm AP Townley, and this is Roleplay Culture. Today we're throwing back to the days of old and exploring materials published in 2nd edition, also known as AD&D, and how it might help us with our current games in D&D. The Arms and Equipment Guide was published in 1991, with multiple writers, or designers as they were known, attached to it. The book is split into 5 chapters: armor, equipment for mounts, weapons, equipment for adventurers, and clothing. Now, the rules attached to these items aren't going to be particularly compatible with the current game, but that's okay, it's not a big deal. It's not much of a hurdle. I'll translate a few of these rules to 5e as we go. The descriptions in the items themselves are what we were really after. I'd like to talk about a few of these items, at least one from every chapter, and see what makes them interesting. The buckler. From the armors chapter, we have, among other things, full-page descriptions of the different suits of armor. They go into great detail about what they're comprised of, some historical references, and the rules. There are even whole sections for just different types of helms. But we are here for the smallest of shields, the buckler. Now, we've had bucklers in later editions of D&D, but not 5th edition. This small round shield is strapped to the arm and provides a bit more minor protection than shields themselves. It's also sometimes referred to as the target shield, which is a term I've never actually heard before. One of the rules suggestions in this book is that this is not really a true shield, but more of a piece of equipment than armor. So I take that to mean that you don't need proficiency to use it. Anyone can use this item. It also gives a +1 bonus to AC, and for only 1 attack per turn. There are other ways to stat the buckler, but this suggestion from the book is pretty interesting. Bits and bridles. There's a whole chapter of equipment for horses or mounts in the book, which I find fascinating because horses and mounts in 5e are kind of an afterthought. If you get a horse, basically you go from point A to point B a little bit faster, and that's about it. I think because combat on mounts just isn't nearly as powerful or as complex as it once was, and therefore mounts as a whole have kind of fallen to the wayside. This chapter has pages of information about different types of barding, which is basically horse armor, info about horseshoes, saddles, saddlebags, horse blankets. But there's a whole section about different bits and bridles. Bits are the things that go into the mount's mouth, where the reins are attached, and they help you, the rider, guide the creature. There are 2 types, which I didn't know that either. The snaffle, no idea what that means, and the curb, still no idea. The snaffle is a gentler on the creature, but it can make controlling wilder mounts a little difficult. I see this as adding 5 feet to the mount's movement, as guiding the creature is a little more efficient, but animal handling checks are a disadvantage, because you have a harder time controlling them. The curb would lower the speed of the mount by 5 feet, but you would not suffer that animal handling penalty, because you have tighter control on your mount. This is used more for war horses. The bridle is complex as well, comprised of 3 parts, which includes the bit, as well as the headstall and the reins. There are 2 types listed: the bradoon, which is hard to cut or snare with weapons, and the cavesson, which is used for training, perhaps giving you the ability to teach a horse more tricks with animal handling. The Main-Gauche. The weapons section, of course, holds the description of many weapons, many of which don't even appear in 5e. But the Main-Gauche caught my eye. Lots of players want to have a character that uses the rapier-dagger fighting style. But unfortunately, unless you take a very specific feat, you can't dual wield with a rapier. And if you did take that feat, it's probably more efficient to dual wield with rapiers in general. But we can fix this easy with the Main-Gauche, which means left hand in French. These weapons are long daggers with elaborate guards and basket hilts. They're not meant for throwing, and there's our fix. Take away the throwing property, and add a special weapon property that allows the weapon to be used in two-weapon fighting, as with non-light weapons, as long as that weapon is a rapier. There are some different arrow types here too. Stone arrows, sheath or war arrows, the historically inaccurate fire arrows, and even flight arrows. There isn't much in the way of rules here. Perhaps that will be another show. But it can be cool to think of a bunch of different arrow types that do different things. But considering how strong archers are anyway, maybe not. There are also about a dozen different polearms here. Many more than appear in 5e. The Healer's Bag. The Adventurer's Equipment chapter is probably the one I find the most interesting, but I'll try to stick to just a couple of examples. I like the Healer's Bag in particular. We have a Healer's Kit in 5e, but the description of it is kind of boring and vague. It only lets you stabilize a dying creature without making a medicine check. Now, don't knock the Healer's Kit. Too many times I've seen players turn their noses up to this piece of equipment, only to run out of spell slots later, flub their medicine check, and fail to save a dying ally. Bet you wish you had it now, don't you, Larry? But the Healer's Bag has a detailed description of what's in it, from how much thread there is for stitches, curved needles made of gold so they don't rust, the amount of bandages and gauze is included as well. I would say the kit/bag should give advantage on medicine checks to treat other creatures. Yeah, that seems to fit. The Spider. The Housebreaker harness, also known as the Spider, is a unique item that I don't think I've seen in later editions, certainly not in 5e. This thief's harness lets a character have ropes weave throughout the rings in the harness and attached to the wall, allowing a character to hang from that wall while keeping their hands free, so they can pick locks or disable traps on something like a window, many feet in the air. Provisions. A quick word about rations in 2nd edition. For the most part, they're pretty similar to what they are in 5e. The description is much more robust and includes alternatives for different races. Apparently elves have a real sweet tooth. But there are some interesting rules that maybe we can adapt. The ration provisions include jerky, hardtack, dried fruit. Because everything is dried, and I mean like really dried, subsisting on provisions means that you need twice as much water to survive. Living off rations for long periods of time isn't healthy and can bring about certain diseases like scurvy. 3 weeks of this would have the party start making Constitution saving throws, DC 10, incrementing by 5 for every additional week. Or, if you fail, take a level of exhaustion. A bit different than what's in this book, but it works. This would really benefit a more survival or exploratory type of game. Yeah, you can't fill that bag of holding with rations. You're going to need to work for it. Hunting, foraging, fishing become a lot more important, as does the survival skill. Also, onions help with scurvy, apparently. Didn't know that. Makes a story about the Onion Knight from Game of Thrones make a little more sense, doesn't it? In that story, he helps relieve a siege by sneaking in provisions, which include a lot of onions, hence the name. And yeah, I looked it up. It's a pretty accurate description. Onions are high in sugar and vitamins. Sumptuary Laws. The clothing chapter is worth reading just for the different medieval descriptions of outfits you could crib for your own game. For instance, a full-wide rain cloak is pretty common depiction of medieval fantasy. You see them in the first Lord of the Rings film when the hobbits enter the town of Bree. That's called a belladronna. Yep, never heard of it, but sounds cool. But what caught my eye wasn't an item per se, but a law, or a series of them, that are mentioned in the book. Called Sumptuary Laws, they were implemented in the 12th century to maintain and identify members of social hierarchy. The type, style, or color of clothing you wore would identify your place in the social order. If you wore something above your station, well, then you were in for a world of trouble. For instance, for a time, the type of fur that lined your clothing determined your social place. If you wore ermine fur, you were aristocracy. But if you wore wolf, you were at the bottom. Color could matter as well. Since the times of ancient Rome, the color purple signified royalty. and you didn't wear that unless you wanted all kinds of bad attention. But we, as designers, could use this. What if the party stumbled upon a collection of powerful magical cloaks, like cloaks of protection or cloaks of magical resistance? But these cloaks are colored purple or trimmed in ermine fur or both, because they once belonged to a royal families of old. But the characters existed in medieval society, so wearing something like that is a no-no. A poisoned apple, if you will. Could create some interesting social drama and decisions for the party. Honestly, we could talk about all the interesting things in this old book for hours. But that's going to have to be it for now. If you want more videos looking at materials for older editions, then you're going to have to subscribe, ring the bell, smash that like button, and share with your friends. If you have any suggestions for older material to review, then tell me about it in the comments below, and I'll see you in the parlor.